it's Lasan. I'm back, your host of the X series and of TSX, welcoming you to our session on bourbon. Today is all about bourbon, and it's really going to be straightforward. We're focusing on straight bourbon. So there are different types, and we're going to talk about the expression of the different types, but it's straight bourbon is what we're trying this time. So I'm going to invite Harry back up here with me because he's a fan of bourbon. So let's give it a go. Harry, come on up. Is it one of your favorite spirits to use when you're concocting, or do you have a favorite?
Yeah, no, I cannot say, just because they're all so, have their own place.
Sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a beautiful one though. Scotch, I believe you're a fan.
I'm a huge fan of Scotch.
Another big
Yeah, yes. Okay, well, we're just going to delve in and do our bourbon thing.
Yep.
So most of you know bourbon has to be minimally 51% corn. Why does that matter? It matters because palate-wise, I don't care about the laws and all of that. But if you get a bourbon that's 51% corn, which it has to be by law, by regulation, and then you get a bourbon that's got maybe 75% corn, you're going to notice a difference. And so what I tried to do this time, we're featuring Matthew McConaughey's bourbon, and it is so different. And I so want you to appreciate what it offers. So I'm contrasting his bourbon with another straight bourbon and very similar mash bill. Mash bill only means sort of the recipe or the formula that they use to make the actual drink. And so I wanted to have similarity so that we can at least go, yeah, no. Why is it no and why is it yes? So I did a little different spin with the bourbon because I think it's important to look at how it makes a difference in its production more so than its mash bill, because the mash bills are pretty much equal across the board with the three that we have. So one is from Tennessee, which people go, that's a bourbon. It really, technically it's a bourbon, but it's not. It's a bourbon made in Tennessee. You can say technically bourbon is, of corn. It is of corn, but we don't say corn whiskey because it has a certain percentage that isn't qualified to be corn whiskey. So I respect that Tennessee has its own moniker, and we call it Tennessee whiskey, not bourbon. But yes, it is primarily corn, which classification-wise it can be a bourbon, but it's made in Tennessee, so it's Tennessee whiskey, and it's got the most amazing effect with its charcoal filtering. And I will talk about that in a minute, but I like the fact that it is charcoal filtering. It adds or takes away some of the congeners that gives Tennessee whiskey just that much more intrigue for me. Do you have a favorite of whiskeys when you think about bourbon? Is there a favorite? I mean, you're a big bourbon person, so I don't know that there's a favorite. But
I adore Tennessee just because that.
Same.
That accentuation. Like you're saying, like it's hard to pick when they're just
It's like
the beauty's there.
Yes, it's absolutely there. And bourbon, we're going to taste and smell. What's a given with bourbon? That's we know bourbon has to be aged minimally 2 months. That's it. And that's going to pick up some flavors and aromatics. So it's already going to have the sense of oak on it. And that's what we're going to get consistently. And we'll talk about the differences in grains and all that in a minute. But let's just delve in and go for it, shall we?
Absolutely.
Okay. I think I'm going to grab a bottle here because there is a bottle. Yes. That is coming our way. Maybe here it'll go get it for us. Thank you. Aha! Look at that. So in case you don't know who that is, we're sipping on Matthew McConaughey. Aha! Wish you were. That's what we're about to do. Shall we?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So prominent of oak. Yeah. So when I say prominent of oak, we're looking at notes of vanilla, often molasses. Based on the char, you're going to get different types of sweetness. You're going to pick up the congeners from the oak barrel that's been charred. That's really what we're getting with most bourbon. Unless there's a high percentage of rye in the mash bill, you tend to get spice notes. So that's almost an indicator for me because I understand nose notes. If I get a bunch of spice on my nose, that's just not the oak barrel. That's the rye in the mash bill. So this one, I definitely get spice. But remember, this is mesquite charcoal, so I don't know if that's from the smoke and the spice of the filtering, which it shouldn't be, or if it's because there's rye in the mash bill. My suspicion is that it's rye in the mash bill because it's so prominent on my nose. But there's a sweetness. And so when you say, can you smell corn, which often I don't think we're smelling corn, and people say, What do you smell? I smell corn. No, it's because it's bourbon. We're not usually smelling corn. When you smell corn and you smell bourbon, they don't smell alike. It's often, as a sommelier, people say the same thing. When I ask them, what are you smelling with a wine? They say, I smell grapes. What type of grapes? Green. Wrong. You're not smelling that. Our minds tell us that, so we think it is. But this one does have a sweetness, much like corn would have on the nose.
Very much so.
But I believe that's equated to the oak.
Yeah,
So,
you nail it with the vanilla.
yes.
The glass is absolutely coming through.
Okay, so let's just give it a go. I'm getting a lot of vanilla, like vanilla, more vanilla, a little caramel, and spice. That's what I got.
Like allspice kind of berries.
Yeah, but it's intriguing. The nose it's even got a bit of oddly like orange. I don't know where that's coming from. It's an orange citrus. It's like, whoa, what are you hitting me with, Matthew? I like it, but I don't know. So it's an intriguing aromatics that just keeps me in the glass because it keeps revealing different nose notes. But okay, right? It's got some layers on the nose at least. Shall we give it a go?
Absolutely.
Okay. Matthew, not bad at all.
The finish too.
This has,
Fascinating.
yes. So the palate for me confirms the nose. The spice is right there. It arrives dead center of my palate and it hangs out on the end. It's kind of like what I'd imagine he is as a person. I get this intrigue coming in on my palate initially, and it just hangs out there with a little bit of charm, hanging on to every bit. It's oh my God, it's gorgeous. It doesn't linger for very long. It's rather introductory on its palate, but it's definitely gorgeous. It's a sexy dram. Yeah, it's definitely explosive of spice. It's got that like that daring. It's what? This is a Matthew McConaughey in a glass. That's exactly what this is. It's all right. That's exactly what I'm getting. I hope you guys have had this Longbranch by Wild Turkey. Oh my, this is literally drinking Matthew's personality in a glass. It's got all that intrigue. It brings you in. You taste it. It's got a little punch of excitement. It's got this like charm. And I don't know if it's the mesquite charcoal. I don't know what it is, but it's working for me. I like it. It's introductory. So my bourbon fans, my aficionados, you're going to say too light, too easy for you, but it's certainly a solid dram. I'm digging this. What do you think?
Oh yeah, just a layer of mystique, like just the movement pops up front, like you said, but it has just like this, to me, this bottom finish that is, it opens up.
Right. Yeah. I think it's lovely. It's definitely introductory, and I think it's fantastic for what it is. The other thing which I didn't talk about is the fact that it's a straight bourbon. So we know, or we don't know, with straight bourbons, what we can expect is a mellowing. This is certainly mellow. It's not subdued, it's far from dead, but it's definitely mellow. It has that smooth, engaging, welcoming heartiness to it, right? And it's definitely not punching you. There's nothing about it that's that aggressive, but it has a bit of charm of spice dead center. So I think it's got that. And for a straight bourbon, you would expect it to be smooth. Straight only means that it has to be at least 2 years aged in new oak barrels. Unlike the bourbon itself, only 2 months. A straight bourbon, minimally 2 years, and most are much longer. In the case with this, I believe I read it's 8 years. So if it indicates 8 years, that's the youngest level of aging. So it could be even longer. So right on, Matthew. Good job. Yes,
Great work.
I think so, right?
Absolutely.
Should we try the next?
Let's do it.
Okay. Well, we have another bourbon here, and this one is going to be from Tennessee, which I don't like to be partial, but Tennessee does offer so much personality aromatically and on the palate. So I'm a huge fan of Tennessee bourbon, as people say, but it's Tennessee whiskey. Okay, let's give it a go on the nose. Completely night and day. So this is not the same nose. You can tell right away that this nose is not the same as what we just nosed. So now these notes are more of molasses for me versus surely. It's more molasses, maple syrup is a more burnt caramel, less of the vanilla, lighter notes of sweetness.
Richness.
Yes. It has a interesting, there's slightly spice, almost a grainy granola-like nose to it, almost a cereal quality, and it could be the malted barley, but It's a pleasant nose. It's a lot more layers going on than I got on the first one of Longbranch, but it's lovely on the nose. Let's give it a go. I'm a fan of Tennessee whiskey. I just am. This is outrageous. It stands up to everything you would expect it to. It's got so much going on. The palate has a bit of a, not sweetness, but it's almost a caramel-like sweetness. It's got subtle spice, so it doesn't punch you with spice. So I suspect there's very little rye in the mash bill. At least it doesn't show up as much. And it has a smoothness. It's not a burn. It's a very easy.
Silky layer.
Yes, yes. This is welcoming as well. So I think that's what they have in common, the welcoming aspect. But this is a little more layered than the previous one. So I wouldn't consider this introductory.
It doesn't have that like almost ethereal top too. It's very much so this structure like it's here.
For sure.
Rather than like having this like
out there in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
This is focused, it's lasered in with lots more information. And but again, I might be a little partial because I'm a huge fan of Tennessee whiskey, but this speaks to Tennessee 100%. Delightful. You ought to try Tennessee whiskey if you haven't. Again, I'm not sponsored to do any of that branding, so I'm not, but it is fantastic. Shall we move on to the last one?
Absolutely.
Okay. Another bourbon, straight bourbon that is. Okay. So this nose is, again, completely different. These are all straight bourbons and strikingly different. One was vanilla, mostly, a bit of light caramel. The second was more molasses, burnt sugar, more maple syrup on the nose.
This one getting those like almost toasted cereal kind of notes.
Yeah, I would agree. This definitely has a more toasted, and that again is probably imparted from the wood itself, but it's definitely a different nose. It almost has a slight, it may be the alcohol, actually. It has a slight, interesting nose. I can't describe it, but it almost has a bent of, I want to say, a vegetal note, and you shouldn't expect that. It just has an earthiness to it outside of oak. But I like it. The nose is intriguing. Yeah, I could see that, mossy, which is that earthiness.
Yeah.
I'm digging it, though. I like it. I do get coconut, so coconut's prominent. Again, that's an oak characteristic. Let's give it a go. They're just getting bigger, bolder, as beautiful as the first.
Ooh, spice finish.
This has much spice on it. So this offers weight. It's a bigger bourbon than the first one, Matthews. This has a little more bossiness going on for it. It doesn't slap me with spice on my palate, but it offers so much more. It engages me with spice. I'm like, whoa, who are you? It talks to me in a way that shuts me up and makes me listen, where Longbranch allowed me to decipher, think about, love, and joy. It forces me to think a lot. It's contemplative.
Right. Big finish.
Right. This is kind of bossy, I call it. It's all in my face, but I'm digging it. So I'm not disappointed by any of them. And again, we're looking at a different region. So we had Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana. All different expressions, but it goes to show you that straight bourbon is not straight bourbon just because of its designation of being 2 years minimally. And all of these are at least 8 based on their bottling. So there is, what I can say consistently is there's a smoothness about each of them. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a smoothness. There's an introductory element, a simplicity to Longbranch, but it's very engaging. It has a charm to it with a spice in the center. The second one from Tennessee has so many nuances. It's hard to go into. And the last one from Indiana has a gorgeous, powerful, forceful way about itself that engages my palate that I'm still wondering what I was tasting. It's pretty spot on. I like it. Yes, wasn't it? Well, that's our bourbon wrap. It's a wrap. Thank you for hanging out with us. We will come back with a cocktail in a little bit to see what works good with it. Thank you so much. Take care.